Time now for the big story, and shocking new projections suggest migration is on track to be as high as 1 million this year. We're told ministers are braced for net migration, that's the number entering the UK minus those leaving, to hit a record high, surpassing the previous peak of 500,000 last year. So, 1 million people to enter the country in a year, potentially. What are the implications? Let's get reaction now from the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity and former UKIP MEP, Stephen Woolfe. Stephen, why is this such a worrying figure? What are the implications for my viewers and listeners?
Well, the massive implication is the increase in population of the United Kingdom, but more particularly England, where the vast majority of these people are living. The first situation that we have is now that England has become the most dense populated country in Europe, surpassing that of Holland. But if you look at some of the practicalities, the head of Ofwat has suggested that based on a population figure of 66 million people, the country is short of 4 million gallons of water every single day. And as a consequence, we need to have shortages of water being cut off in the summer, and quadrupling our prices. But those figures are not accepting the fact that we'll have 1 million people net migration this year, and potentially at the rates that we're considering now, where most of these are coming in either as students or low-wage workers, 1 million people next year. That's one example. Everybody knows that when they're looking down their high streets and their country lanes, they're seeing houses being built. The roads are congested, our schools are full, and hospitals are not getting enough money in to be able to pay for the increased numbers of people requiring the services of hospitals and doctors. All of this is a consequence of increasing population, of which migration is the biggest driver.
However, Stephen, don't we need people to come here to do the jobs that the indigenous population will not do? And is there not a direct correlation between economic growth and levels of migration into a country?
Well, let's deal with the latter point. Yes, you're quite right. In terms of what's called GDP, a figure loved by the Bank of England and loved by the Treasury, if you increase population, then GDP rises. And that's one of the reasons why one of the biggest supporters of increasing immigration into the country is that of the Treasury, because if you increase GDP, it looks good on the international stage. But there is another figure called GMP, which talks about what is the wealth of an individual. If you take all the population of the country and you add more people, actually what we earn and what we owe, our own individual wealth decreases the more people we put in. Now, that is a big argument that I know is going through in some parts of government, but the Treasury is always winning with that part. And in respect of jobs, that's not necessarily the case. All that you do by increasing immigration is create a low-wage economy. People don't invest in new technology, don't invest in the things that keep us competitive with other parts of the world, and makes us a lazy nation. And that is why we're falling behind some of our other international competitors, because they're investing in technology and production much more quickly than we are, because they're not having the same levels of population growth.
I think we were all shocked when we heard that figure of 500,000 for last year. If it hits 1 million this year, will it be a political watershed?
Oh, absolutely, because it's not only just 1 million that's coming in as net migration. During the Brexit campaign, net migration was at 230,000. It got up to 240,000. Then you had the general election, which was won by the Conservatives, on a message that they would control mass migration. And the numbers had sneaked up to 350,000. The fact that you're getting net migration of 1 million people, everybody can see in the country the impacts in their local communities by the increase in population. And some of the figures have actually come on the watch of the Conservative Party. If you take, for example, students, the number of students coming to the United Kingdom now is approaching 500,000 each year. But, and this is one of the Priti Patel changes, 136,000 additionally came as their dependents. Then you've got the workers. 260,000 people came as workers, but their dependents were 150,000. So we had 300,000 people come last year, Mark, who are not workers or students, just the dependents. They still have to use the schools, the hospitals, our doctors, but they're not contributing.
Stephen, do we not need, however, a young population? Is that not something the economy requires, particularly as we have an ageing population? We need young people to go out and work and essentially provide for our pensions.
Well, we do need people, obviously, to work. And if you look at the numbers of workers in the national kind of environment, the Bank of England sees that generally that's pretty static. But what you have seen is 1 million people leaving the workplace since COVID, and you can attract these back. And if you attract people back by improving their capabilities of pensions, reducing national insurance, but more importantly, you've got a lot of people who are actually also leaving the country to go to foreign lands, which in the skilled areas we need. We know this about doctors who feel that they can't become consultants. You know that's happening in the NHS in nurses. They go to Australia and Canada rather than staying here. And that is a consequence of not having a sensible policy that increases the number of people that are being paid better for their jobs, giving them the opportunity to rise the ranks and increasing the funding to all our small and medium-sized businesses that are really developing new technology to improve those areas, as we see in Japan with the use of robots to help the aged or those in care.
Last but not least, briefly, if you can, Stephen, do you see an end to these levels of migration? We're likely to have a Labour government next year. I can't see Keir Starmer cracking down on those numbers.
No, we're going to see this level of numbers settling roughly, I think, around 1 million a year because of the high demand for our student places and the way that the government has increased that. Secondly, there is the pressure from big corporates and the Bank of England and the Treasury to keep a low-wage economy, and that's why they're going to allow the salary for visas to come in pretty much around £23,200, which will encourage a lot more people to come in. And of course, when Keir Starmer has a policy in place where he says he's going to control migration, we know that will never happen. It has never happened under any Labour government. And in fact, the highest number of asylum seekers that ever came into the country, around 123,000 in 2001, was under a Labour government.
There you go. Well, I think if you're trying to put a roof over your head, if you're trying to feed your family, if you're trying to get a GP's appointment, if you're trying to get a place in a school for your kids, this is disastrous news. Stephen, great to have you on the show. Stephen Woolfe is the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity and a former UKIP MEP. There you go. From Stephen Woolfe, he said that you could have figures of 1 million people, 1 million net migration every year for the next few years. If that was a decade, that's 10 million people. Big implications for quality of life here in Britain. Your reaction, Mark, at gbnews.uk.